I'm Dinesh Verma, the Executive Director of the CERC. It is my distinct privilege to introduce to you our lunchtime keynote speaker, Ms. Stacy Cummings. Just by way of background, Ms. Cummings currently serves as the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Acquisition. And in this position, she advises the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Acquisition on matters relating to the DoD acquisition system, with a particular focus on enhancing innovation, enhancing data-driven decision-making and approaches across the acquisition enterprise. I have to say I'm quite amazed at the diversity of Ms. Cummings's background. Prior to coming into this leadership position within ANS, she was the PEO for Defense Healthcare Management Systems, where she managed the delivery of healthcare and advanced data sharing through a modernized electronic health record system for service members, veterans, and their families. She's also served in the past as the Executive Director of the Federal Railroad Administration and the Interim Executive Director for the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, amongst other leadership roles. Thank you so much, Ms. Cummings, for agreeing to be our keynote speaker for the SSRR 2020.
Thank you, Dinesh. Happy to be here.
Over to you.
Great. Thank you so much. As Dinesh pointed out, I am the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Acquisition. I work for the Honorable Mr. Fahey, as well as the Honorable Miss Ellen Lord. And I just wanted to start out by talking a little bit about the Undersecretary's priorities, talk about how they flow down to the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Acquisition, and then get into some of the things we're doing, our accomplishments over the last year, and what we anticipate accomplishing over the next year related to acquisition innovation. So let me start with the big picture and start with the mission of the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment, which is to enable the delivery and sustainment of secure and resilient capabilities to the warfighter and international partners quickly and cost effectively. And the way that we do that is through a series of goals, objectives, and initiatives all around enabling innovation in acquisition, building safe and secure and resilient acquisition systems, as well as the defense industrial base. And then, of course, Ms. Lord has a strong role in safe and resilient DoD installations and reducing total ownership cost when we look at the sustainment element of acquisition and sustainment. All of those initiatives are really important and could not be done without a diverse acquisition and sustainment workforce who is trained and empowered across the Department of Defense to deliver capability at the speed of relevance, which is really what acquisition innovation is all about from Ms. Lord's perspective. So let me talk a little bit about the most transformational change to the defense acquisition system in years, maybe even in decades, which is the transition from a one size fits all sort of milestone based acquisition system to one that continues to have significant and appropriate oversight and rigor, but that really just increases the flexibility and adaptability of the acquisition system to deliver capability to the warfighter when they need it. And so you may remember the wall chart that I don't know if I'm embarrassed to say or pleased to say that I actually participated in developing the second version of that, which kind of tells you how old I am. But we really were focused on putting all of the lessons learned, all of the best practices into a large policy document that then you could visualize from a milestone-based approach. And that was a very important and critical step in developing the defense acquisition system and the defense acquisition workforce. But what we realized over the last several years is that as technology has advanced and as software has become a much more critical part of delivering capability, warfighting capability, we really needed to take a new look at how we were, the framework by which we are acquiring programs in the Department of Defense. also guided by the National Defense Strategy that really challenged the acquisition workforce to deliver capability faster, in a more iterative way, and to be more adaptable and to be more flexible. And so Ms. Lord responded to that challenge by a few years ago implementing the first sort of framework of adaptability that incorporated not just the milestone-based major capability pathway that we are all very familiar with, but introduced the idea of this middle tier of acquisition, which had been authorized by Congress. And this middle tier was really meant to bridge the gap between an urgent capability, which is really based on loss of life, something that is an immediate requirement, where a 70% solution now within the next year to two is more important and more impactful than waiting for a full 100% solution that might take 8 or longer years. So this middle tier of acquisition really kind of kicked off this idea of an adaptive acquisition framework that could be leveraged by program managers who were empowered by their decision authorities to deliver capability as fast as necessary. And so here we had a few different ways that you could acquire products and programs. And Ms. Lord really focused on how do we move that capability delivery as far to the left. So we had an adaptive acquisition framework, and we had gotten a lot of feedback from the Defense Innovation Board, the Defense Science Board, that one thing we were missing was that idea that software is different. Software is different than hardware, and that software is, and I love this phrase, software is immortal. And we were treating software in that same milestone-based approach that had a development phase, a production phase, and a sustainment phase. And that's just not how software works. And so I'm super excited about the most recent pathway that we established, and that is the software acquisition pathway. So as a result of all of that work done under the Undersecretary's office in the last 2 years, it all culminated in the last couple of months with the signature of the software acquisition pathway policy, as well as the overarching defense acquisition system roles and responsibility policy signed out by the Deputy Secretary. So all of the policies that I just talked about, you can find them by going to the Acquisition Enablers website. If you do a search for DASD AE or for Acquisition Enablers DoD, you can access all of these policies, as well as a lot of training material and other collateral that will help you better understand really what we're getting at when we talk about the adaptive acquisition framework. Now, this framework is built on 6 tenets. The tenet of simplifying acquisition policy. So we have some of our policies are as streamlined as about 10 to 12 pages. And what we're really looking to do here is to have policy in our policy documents, and all of those lessons learned, best practices, and guidance. We want those to be resident on an interactive website where our program teams can have access to them when they need them, but that they're not embedded in our policy documents, which creates a perception that every one of those lessons learned is appropriate for every single acquisition. We want each program team to develop a unique acquisition strategy based specifically on the capability that they have been tasked with acquiring. And that takes us to our second tenet, which is tailor acquisition approaches. Now, I will tell you that we have always in the defense acquisition system had the ability to tailor out. And so when I talk about our milestone-based acquisition approaches, they have always been able to be tailored. You can tailor out those things. You were able to tailor out those things that were unnecessary based on your technology level, based on your risk, based on the urgency of what you were going to deliver to the warfighter. But what we found, and what I found as a PEO, is that it tends to get more, it is more difficult to tailor out when you have a checklist of things that you started with than it is to start with your blank sheet of paper and tailor in those things that are required based on the capability and the risk of the capability that you're acquiring. And so we really wanted to flip the paradigm upside down and look at this from a different perspective. And that is, again, this tailor in, starting with only those things that are required by law, but tailoring in all the studies, reports, the oversight, the testing, all of the things that will make your program successful, tailor those in so that you are purposefully making those decisions as you develop your acquisition strategy, and that you're iteratively looking at it to make sure that you're continuing to drive down risk, drive down costs, and introduce new technology and new approaches. None of this is possible if we don't empower our program managers. And what that means is our program teams need to have direct access to their decision makers, their decision authority, to be able to introduce innovation, new ideas, get decisions made very, very quickly, and to drive that decision making to the level that is closest to the delivery of the capability. So we really want to empower our program managers, which of course requires us to provide adequate training, as well as tools and policies that support that empowerment. The fourth tenet is data-driven analytics, and I'm going to talk a little bit about data because I think that this is very relevant to this group, and I'm really excited about the new partnership that we've established that I'll talk about in just a few seconds. Actively manage risk. This, you've heard me say risk probably 18 times since I started talking to you. We need to have an approach to risk that is not we don't want to avoid it and eliminate it. We want to manage it because we want to take the appropriate risks at the appropriate time, drive that risk down, put in mitigation strategies so that we're managing risk at the appropriate level so that we can introduce speed and introduce technology throughout the life cycle of the program. And then an emphasis on sustainment. So Dinesh mentioned some of my background, but I actually started my career, and most of my career was as a logistician. So this one is very important to me. We need to be building in as early as possible in the life cycle our plans to sustain, our plans to cyber secure, our plans to partner with international partners. The earlier in the life cycle that we build these decisions in, the better a chance we have to do so at the most affordable cost, drive down those life cycle costs, and really consider how our weapon systems and our systems are being used, because we understand how we're going to continue to keep them actively working in the field with our customers, being the warfighter. So I know I said a lot in the last probably 10 minutes, but again, I encourage you to go to our website where you can have access to all of these policies, as well as learn more about the adaptive acquisition framework and all of the associated policies that you're going to see when you go to the website. Now, one other thing I want to touch on from a policy perspective is the idea that when we created the adaptive acquisition framework and we moved to a tailor in versus a tailor out, I don't want anyone to come to the conclusion that all of the very, very important functional areas that they are left out of our policy framework, because they remain critically important. However, we do want to look at how we apply those functional policies to each of the different pathways in the framework, because they each have a unique characteristic that would drive some of those functional policies to be applied in a different way. So let me, as an example, talk about test and evaluation. So we're anxiously anticipating a new test and evaluation policy being signed out in partnership with the Director of Operational Test, as well as the Undersecretary for Research and Engineering, bringing together developmental and operational tests. So when you look at our traditional way of testing, in that traditional milestone-based approach of a major acquisition, we would develop technology, we would create a production representative to test on, and we would do some serial testing. First, we'd have our contractor test, then our developmental test, then our operational test. It would culminate with a very large operational test with the users, and that would sort of introduce the ability to more widely produce and deploy our system. And that makes a lot of sense in a hardware environment where we're building very large, very innovative, and frankly, large cost systems with a very large price tag. that is a very, very good approach. That approach does not work in software. Certainly not if we want to be delivering capability to the warfighter, getting minimum viable products in their hand, and updating and upgrading, keeping up to speed, up to date, not just with technology, but with cyber threats and with other types of technology enhancements that will continue to keep our software working appropriately and reduce risk and keep it cyber secure. And so what you'll see when this new test and evaluation policy comes out is much more integration between developmental and operational tests, much more openness to automated testing, to digital, using digital environments in order to support testing. And I'm really, really excited to see how program teams are going to start to implement this new policy as it comes out, and really shift testing to the left, especially when the digital environment allows us to do that. Some of the other new policies that we're excited about is the cybersecurity policy, which again, we're anticipating here before the end of the year. We really want to drive cybersecurity into our weapon systems early as possible in the development. And I come at this from having direct experience deploying a commercial off-the-shelf electronic health record and building cybersecurity in not just to the network and the infrastructure, but building it in as you're developing your systems is critically important. And it really drives the cost up if you're waiting to try and cybersecure at the end. Have direct experience with that, and some of that really drove our policy making in this area. The other area in cybersecurity is our defense industrial base. As we move more and more into this digital environment, and we want to be developing our programs using digital engineering, we're going to be manufacturing using additive manufacturing and 3D models in order to support manufacturing and sustainment. Our data, it's critically important that our data is protected. And most of our data is created and resides on defense industrial base infrastructure. So when I look at cybersecurity, I look at it from 3 different aspects. One is securing our networks in DoD. 2 is building cybersecurity into our weapon systems. And the 3rd is ensuring our defense industrial base secures our data to the same level that we would. And so all of those aspects are supported in policy that's existing, but also we're going to build upon that as we get more policies out over the next several months. Another new policy that was released or published last year is intellectual property. To me, all these things fit very, very well together when you think about digital engineering, additive manufacturing, and data rights. We really need to understand and tailor the negotiation for intellectual property and data rights based on, again, emphasizing sustainment, how we intend to use the data as we throughout the entire life cycle, including when we get into sustainment. And so our intellectual property policy really encourages that tailoring and looks at intellectual property and data rights the same way we look at developing acquisition strategies, is that every program is unique. So we don't want to apply a cookie cutter approach to how we negotiate data rights with our industrial partners. So a couple of other things I want to talk about that are priorities for Ms. Lord and priorities for us in the DoD that supports this transformation of the defense acquisition system. And that is the idea of data and data driving decision making. So as we introduce all of these pathways, we really need to be able to measure not just the success of an individual program, but the success of the system and how the pathways and the policies that we've written are impacting the ability for our system, for our portfolios, and for our programs to successfully deliver capability at the speed of relevance. And so we had previously had an approach that we were looking at acquisition data as being something that we needed to collect and capture it at OSD on the Secretary's staff here. And technology has allowed us to look at that from a different perspective. And all of the department's leadership feels very strongly that data is an enterprise tool. It is an asset that belongs to the department, even though it may reside at different levels within the department, whether it's in a program office with a service, in an agency, or at the department level. And so we are in the process here at in the Office of Acquisition and Acquisition Enablers of transitioning from our legacy system into, which was called DAMER, into a modern infrastructure that is called DAVE. And the purpose of having this modern infrastructure is so we can take advantage of APIs and data sharing and not have to hold all of the data, have it reside and have program teams have to enter it in, but actually to be able to take advantage of all of the data systems that already exist, to leverage data where it resides, so closest to where it's created. And then we've partnered with the comptroller's office with a tool called Advana, which creates an analytic layer. So leveraging this analytic layer, we want to be able to pull data from Dave from OSD. We want to pull data from the services. We want to pull data from programs. And we want to be able to look across the pathways, really understand the impact of the adaptive acquisition framework, our policies, our functional policies, look at the health of the system, look at the health of portfolios and programs, and really use that to drive decision-making at the program, the portfolio, and then all the way up to the OSD policy level. And so that's what we're looking to achieve as we implement Ms. Lord's vision around data-driven decision-making. So now I want to talk a little bit about how our partnership is being kicked off and talk about the Acquisition, Innovation, and Research Center, which we're calling ERIC. So we, in the 2020 NDAA, had some language that requested that we, the DoD, look at how we can find new partners and different ways to look at acquisition innovation. And we really wanted to be thinking just differently and more in a more innovative way about acquisition approaches and how we can approach policy making, how we use data, and really how we implement acquisition strategies for unique capabilities as we deliver them. So in September, we actually formalized our partnership with R&E, and we established the Acquisition, Innovation, and Research Center in partnership with the CERC. So really excited about that. The ERIC, AIRC, ERIC, will be the operational research arm that will enable us to engage academia through a network of universities. And I'm really excited about this because I think that this will give us access to just a level of research and of thought leadership that will be different than the experiences that we government employees and those of us who have grown up in the defense acquisition system, and really give us an opportunity to be innovative, to collaborate. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what sort of great ideas come out of this partnership, and our ability to really continuously engage and outreach with academia and other non-traditional innovative partnerships. So we're going to be looking to do some piloting and prototyping of our policies. We want to leverage analytics and really provide access to historical data to see how that can impact our decision making and our policy making. Workforce and professional development. We see a real opportunity to partner in how we are training our defense acquisition workforce, potentially in new ways, and partnering with DAU in order to do that. And really, let's just help. We just want some help, and we want some different voices to help us better understand if the policies are working the way that we intended them to. And if they are, and if they aren't, we can make changes or look at new ways to bring adaptive and flexible approaches to our defense acquisition system. So what we need from you, and I hope that you're as excited as I am, is offer ideas for how you think the ERIC can help improve our acquisition outcomes, provide innovative thinking. If you have any ideas for pilots, we'd love to have you share those. And you're going to have Mark Crisco joining you today. He'll be available to answer questions and talk about some of the things we're looking for. Participate in the community. We really, again, want to showcase non-traditional opportunities across the breadth of the defense acquisition system. And we're very excited about this partnership. So with that, Dinesh, thank you so much for allowing me to videotape this so that I could fully participate in your keynote. And Dinesh, if you have any questions, happy to answer them right now, or I know that you're going to be available to answer any specific questions of the audience.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cummings. I know that you have a real conflict on November 18th. I'm really grateful that you were able to find time on your schedule to let us do this recording. And certainly we will gather all the inputs we get from the 300 plus delegates at the SSRR, and we'll engage with your team as we proceed forward. Thank you again for your support and your trust in the CERC in helping you stand up, Eric, as we move forward.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.